All right. Excellent. Hello and welcome. Welcome. And to the Chinese Medicine Podcast live stream. Today I'm going to be talking about a couple of questions that people have asked me and answering your questions live on the stream. So, welcome aboard. I've got some books that I want to talk about for self-help in Chinese medicine, some really great little books. And I want to talk about essential oils and Chinese medicine. So we'll mention that and what they like, what you might use them for, and things like that in a 5 element sense. And I've also got a question about liver heat and rosacea. So I'm going to try my best to answer that one for you today. And let's get into it. So if you have a question, please put it in the comments below. If you're jumping into this stream in the post, it's not live, we'll welcome as well. And you can put a question below and I'll try to answer it the following week or whatever. Next week, I won't be doing it at this same time, but I'm going to try to make this time the regular time. Now, I realise that people all over the world can't watch this, and I know it's 2 a.m. or something like that for people in the UK. So I'll probably alternate like a UK time every 2 or 3 weeks, and that'll be next week. I'm not sure what time that will be, but this is like 9 a.m. on a Wednesday for me. I can kind of do this and nice and bright. I can do this late at night as well, but I'm probably not going to be as interested in talking about Chinese medicine late at night for you. So let's talk about some of these books that I'm just going to quickly mention off the cuff before we get into the question and before we get into the Q&A. So let me have a quick look. I'm just checking this is right. Okay, so if you have a question, you can pop it in the chat. We can have a little chat. So one of the books I've recommended over and over is this one here for people that are interested in, like, let's say you're new at learning Chinese medicine, you go to an acupuncturist and you want to know more about Chinese diet therapy. This is an easy book to get hold of. It's called The Tao of Healthy Eating, the TAO Tao, like that's how it's spelled. There's different ways of spelling it. Sometimes it's spelled DAO, Tao, and sometimes TAO. So this is by Bob Flaws. Now, this book does a few things, and I'm not endorsing Bob Flaws as in everything he's got is great, but it was very beneficial to me when I was first learning. I just want to check the volumes right. I just realised I didn't even check that. That. There we go. Sorry about that. I don't know why I decided I would just check it and press a button when I checked it. Anyway, so sorry about that. So let's go back to this book. So Bob Flaws, I'm not saying I endorse everything he's saying, but it is a very easy to read book when you don't know much about Chinese medicine or about acupuncture or herbs or something, and he presents a lot of stuff for people in a self-help way, and he has a lot of books like that. So it's not classical Chinese medicine, but it's TCM, and it's still good TCM. It's not terrible, and it's still useful. Like, there's a lot of utility in the diet therapy in these books. So the general idea of how to eat healthily what you should eat. Now you can watch the video that I've done on why I eat mostly cooked foods, that kind of stuff. It's that's where I got those ideas from, is from this book. So this is a good way to do that. And he answers some questions like, what about coffee? What about some of these things that people ask about? Talks about different patterns. He talks about pesticides and chemicals, flavors and spices, like wrecked foods, like too much cooking and overheating of foods, that kind of stuff. It's very simple. There's only little sections on it, so it's not like a massive book that's going to keep you up all night. And then there's probably about this much left of the book, so maybe a third of the book, just describing the qualities of foods. Now, sometimes if you're really getting in the deep and nitty-gritty of it, there are differing opinions on, whether some foods are cooling or warming. But in general, this is good. It's going to be useful for you. It's going to tell you, I wouldn't really worry about what channel the foods enter. It's very hard even to use herbs in that way. People haven't really mastered that way of, there's not many herbs that do that, and foods, you can't sort of go, this is going to enter my spleen channel and I've got something on my leg, I'm going to use that food for that way. But certainly the flavors of foods, like whether it's bitter or salty or something like that, that's useful to know. And it's useful to know about whether it's cooling or warming for sure, or neutral. If you know what your pattern of disharmony is, then you can start to kind of get foods to use that. So I'm not endorsed by these books. People just ask me all the time, what books should I use? What books should I read? And that would kind of be a good one to get started. Now, the next one, if you really, really want to go up a level, this one's a big one. It's a big, thick one. It's an older book too. It's been around a long time. It's called Healing with Whole Foods by Paul Pitchford. Now, this is not a strictly TCM Chinese medicine book. He does love raw foods. But what this is good for is it's got lots of recipes. And it's good if you want to have a plant-based diet, a vegetarian kind of diet. I don't think he really thinks that much of meat. I'm pretty sure that there's not much meat in here. But there's no reason why you couldn't take some of those vegetarian recipes and add meat to it, or use that, when you're cooking something vegetarian to go with your meat. There's no reason why you can't use that. And if you're interested in knowing how to cook some of these things and how to do that, then this is going to be useful, especially cooking from scratch. So whole foods, like how do you make some stuff like sourdough bread and things like that? I'm pretty sure that's in it. There's also a lot of information here about lots of different things. So like this book's used by a lot of naturopaths, natural therapists, not just Chinese medicine, but it does have a general leaning towards macrobiotics and Chinese medicine. So it's definitely got lots of TCM kind of concepts in there, like blood deficiency, dampness, that kind of stuff. But then he talks in detail about there's lots of stuff he talks in detail about that isn't in, like things that are like nutritional values of things that are not in any other TCME kind of books. So this is worthwhile, I would say, especially because it's got a lot of recipes in it. So that's just my little book review. I've got a longer video on those two books on the channel. So one of the questions I was asked today was, and if you're joining into this stream, you're welcome to put a question into the chat. Usually when I do these, it takes a while for people to kind of come in. So I'll have a couple of topics that I'll start with, and then we'll get right into it. So I'm going to use this book. Hit myself in the head with it. I'm going to use this book, Aromatherapy for Healing the Spirit, to talk about some of the qualities of essential oils for in Chinese medicine, and also talk about this topic of rosacea. So, and I think they wanted to know about, rosacea in general, rosacea and liver heat. So, I'm not going to do a full video on this like right now, but I'll just give a couple of pointers to it because this person's asked this question several times and really wanted to kind of know. So, firstly, it's a pretty complex situation, rosacea. It's not like normal general acne, in terms of there could be lots of different patterns of disharmony causing it. And so it's really important that you go to a practitioner. And if you haven't got a good enough practitioner, like you're not, or you I shouldn't say a good enough practitioner, but like, if you tried going to a practitioner, it still hasn't helped it. Maybe it's time to seek out a different practitioner, or to look at the style of treatment you're doing. So maybe acupuncture isn't enough, or maybe you're not doing the acupuncture regularly enough for it to be effective, or herbal medicine's needed. So there's a few things to consider just in general that it could be. This is how a practitioner would be thinking about it. Firstly, the diagnosis might just pop out at you if a patient came to you and they had a very clear TCM or Chinese medicine diagnosis. Then we would go about treating that. And the story is that if we treat that, then your body resolves what's wrong with it. What is rosacea? It's kind of redness on the cheeks or redness on the skin. And it's a flaring of your body's yang, flaring to that area. Now, we ask ourselves, where is it flaring? Where in the body? Like, what channel is it on? And this is the stomach channel. So this kind of area here belongs to the stomach, around that masseter muscle at the side. This cheek area is stomach channel. Now, there are other channels on the face, like heaps of channels. You've got your stomach channel kind of coming down under your eye as well. So there, and also coming onto the cheek and around the lips. So anything around those areas could relate to the stomach channel. And that's a really important avenue to explore. So we'll talk about that in a sec. The other way that it could be seen is, your small intestine channel also comes down onto here. So it could be part of your digestive issue as well. Is that like this, it could be heat in the stomach area. And why is that happening? It could be diet. It could be because of too much heating kind of foods or heating kind of drinks like alcohol. It could be hormonally related in terms of an imbalance that's causing this heat to kind of flare out. Now, in classical Chinese medicine, they would just say, well, that's your body's yang flaring out, which it is. And in TCM, they might use this pattern of liver heat, which is still the yang. It's like loose yang, like yang floating out from there. And it could be an imbalance between wood and earth. So earth belongs to the stomach belongs to the earth element, and the wood element could be affecting that, why it's getting onto the stomach channel. So it's like the cause of the problem could be to treat the wood or treat the liver. So last week in this live stream, I was talking about frustration, anger, resentment, that kind of stuff, and that's all the wood element problem. And that the same kind of mechanism could actually cause this kind of problem, like the flaring. Instead of it causing someone to be angry and resentful, they could still actually feel that as well. Could be kind of the liver overacting on the earth, on the spleen, so, and the stomach really. So that's could be part of it. Another aspect of this thing could be just purely diet. So the diet is like causing the yang ming organs, the stomach and the large intestine, to kind of get a heating up going on in there. So then that sort of heating is kind of flaring out. Hormonally, like, things change as as your body changes. So there could be something going on with your menstrual cycle that could be treated in TCM or Chinese medicine. And in that way, then the rosacea might clear up through that way. So through like identifying a problem there. Some practitioners go into like blood testing, and they can kind of sit. Now, that's not strictly Chinese medicine, as in it's not really Chinese medicine practice to get a blood test and go, well, here's your herbs from your blood test. That's not TCM and that's not Chinese medicine. It's kind of a hybrid thing. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just that's not what they did in the Han Dynasty. They didn't have blood tests to do that. So how would they detect what's wrong? Well, they're feeling the pulse and looking at your tongue and things like that, and getting the information to make a pattern diagnosis based on your body's presenting the symptoms. We shouldn't be prescribing herbs based on, your hormones are this or that. But you can detect those levels of change through blood tests. And, we don't have to ignore those things in modern times. But it's certainly not necessary. It shouldn't be necessary to do a proper Chinese medicine diagnosis. So there are some ways. And it can give some patients like a bit of a sense of like, well, this is where things are going if they can't notice a difference in their symptoms directly. Sometimes hormonal changes or blood tests might reveal changes that are happening in the background that they might not see with their symptoms physically straight away. So it could also help to let you know that you're on the right track earlier, rather than committing to like months and months of herbs and nothing happening and thinking nothing's working, whereas something might be working. So blood tests and things like that could be useful in those ways. So we're just talking about rosacea and liver heat, or the earth element aspect of rosacea. So for that person's question, I would say that it's quite a complex thing in terms of what the cause is. It's not like, oh, here's 5 foods, eat this, your rosacea will go away. It doesn't work like that. There are some points you could try to use for yourself to clear, or drain the stomach channel of its heat. If your body's very depleted, I wouldn't use this approach. So if you're the sort of person that goes to an acupuncture session and you feel really tired after it, no matter what, if you've been told like your pulse is really faint and they can hardly feel it, that kind of stuff, that would be possibly an indication that it's hard to kind of know. But I'll get to your question. Thanks, Carol. That's a great one. I'll just finish this train of thought quickly. So the point you could try is called Stomach 44. Now it's on your foot, not on your hand, but I'll show it to you on your hand. So this would be like your liver 3. Your stomach 44 is in between the second and third web of the feet. Oops, I just touched my phone. Web of your feet, of your metatarsal. So imagine these are your 2 toes. Well, you just come just in front of that, and there's actually 2 points there, stomach 44 and 43. So you could just kind of press in those areas on your feet, and see if like you'd need. I like to use like the back of a pen or something like that. Here's a Sharpie pen, and you just kind of use that, and you would just sort of press down on there, and you'd have to press those points for like at least 5 minutes, maybe a couple of minutes each side, rotating them. Just do it while you're watching TV or something like that. And you'd want to stimulate when you do acupressure, you want to feel heaviness, achiness, tingliness, sometimes even numbness around the area. And then when you take your fingers or the pen or whatever off the point, the whole area should feel something, keep feeling something going on there. So that's a good one. All right, so we've got another question here. Carol says, what about SIBO? Any recommendations on diet and treatment? So SIBO a really interesting modern day diagnosis of stuff that we can definitely address that kind of in Chinese medicine. So I want to talk about a couple of things in relation to this. So one is, often if you have a SIBO diagnosis, you go to TCM, they'll probably say there's an aspect of dampness there. And what dampness is too much yin and not enough yang. So what SIBO is small intestine bacterial overgrowth, right? That's the acronym for it. So like a lot of people have chronic diarrhea and not enough absorption of nutrients into their system from that. So, it's sort of manageable in the sense of, well, I've just got diarrhea, but then later on you might be eating a healthy diet and then end up with nutrient deficiencies, or other health problems can happen because you're not absorbing those nutrients, and you're just kind of maybe wasting the supplements or things or the herbs or whatever that you're taking. And in a TCM, particularly classical Chinese medicine, we kind of have this idea of like, there's certain things that have to be treated before other things can be treated. And your digestion is one of those things. Like if your digestion isn't working as well as it should be, particularly if it's blocked, it has to be unblocked before your body can like absorb the nutrients from it. And there are particular herbs that act on the small intestine that are not herbs you can take over the counter. They're not herbs you should prescribe yourself. They're quite dangerous herbs if they're improperly prescribed. So there is something that classical Chinese herbalists can do about this, but you cannot do it by yourself. So the recommendation I would give you is go to a herbalist and get the herbs, from a herbalist. And I can't really discuss more in detail about what those herbs are on here because it's too dangerous to tell people what they are. Because they're used inappropriately, even by Chinese medicine practitioners, not just one herb or anything, but just a style of herb. So it's very warm to the small intestine. I've had several patients where they've had a kind of similar situation where this kind of a style of formula has worked quite well on them, in terms of like we see this cold situation in the small intestine and they need that warmness. Now, one of those herbs that acts in that way is ginger, not the fresh ginger, but the dried ginger. So we'll talk about that, and that's something you can use in your diet, but I wouldn't, if you've got SIBO, eating dried ginger isn't going to fix it by itself. It won't be enough. There's a very old classical formula called Li Jung 1. Now, this isn't always the case of treating it, so please, I don't want people to think, oh, it's if you have SIBO, it's Li Jung 1, that's the formula. But I'll just use that as an example to talk about the type of herbs, because that would be like the least strong of some of the herbs that could be used to treat this kind of thing, or to address it in a Chinese medicine way. So firstly, we can't say we're going to treat SIBO because there aren't classical formulas for that. We treat the pattern that the patient presents with, and we treat the person's body and raise their body's yang so that it becomes a better balance. It restores the homeostasis. So that's what SIBO is anyway. It's like a imbalance there of your body's homeostasis. So if there's not enough yang, or yin is going to linger around and this cold, damp, danky situation is going to be there. So think of it as like a basement in your house. Like, so if you've got or a place like the UK or something where it's cold and damp, and if you don't get any sunlight in there, mold will grow. Yep, and it will just, because there's no light. Light kills that bacteria, it kills that mold and all that sort of stuff. So think about a herb like dried ginger as the warmth, as the sun. There's other Chinese herbs that are kind of act in that same way, these sort of yang tonics. So ginger, it's the same ginger you can grow, right? So fresh ginger is when you pick it straight away out of the ground, and that ginger acts on your stomach more, whereas the dried ginger acts more on your small intestine and your gut area. So this formula called Li Jung 1 is kind of like a formula a lot of practitioners would travel with if they have a kind of a generally tendency towards a weakness, and that's why they got food poisoning or diarrhea, or barley belly or something like that. That's a kind of a formula. It's LIZHONG 1 WAN, and it's only got 4 herbs in it, but one of those herbs is that dried ginger. And what the dried ginger does is it helps to like literally dry up the damp or put more yang. It's like opening the door in the dark area, in the dark, dank kind of basement and letting some warmth come in there. So you wouldn't hang out in that dark, dank basement, live in there. It'll be very uncomfortable, very cold, and you'd be just sort of like, you won't be enjoying yourself. Unless you opened the door and let some fresh air come in there, and also let some warmth come in there. So you might let some warmth come in by the sunlight or by putting a heater on or something like that. And as the more you heat that area up, it might not actually kill the mold, but it stops it from growing more. And that's kind of probably what taking ginger by yourself would do. That's why I'm saying I don't think it's enough to just blast out the SIBO situation, but it might stop it from getting worse. Now, in that formula of Li Jung 1, there's other herbs that kind of do different jobs. One of those herbs is licorice, and another herb's called Baiju, which kind of like dries up the dampness in there. So it's kind of like sponging, kind of like getting the water, and so making that area work more less hospitable to the damp, making the damp less comfortable in there. So that would be, recommendations for treatment would be see a herbalist. Now, acupuncture could help you if you did moxibustion, and it's possible if you did self-moxibustion like daily or very regularly on yourself, and you had the moxibox on your abdomen, something like that. Now, a practitioner's going to have to show you how to do that, but that is something that's used in China to do self-treatments. People do it for self-treatment. Now, moxibustion's kind of a very powerful aspect of Chinese of acupuncture that's underutilized. And it's underutilized for a few reasons. One is it stinks. The smell of the smoke stinks. Secondly, it's high risk of burning yourself if you don't know what you're doing. So many practitioners don't give it to their patients to use. You might not have a suitable space to do it at home. So because it's gonna make you if you've ever gone to a practitioner's place and it smells of that weird smoke, or sometimes like a marijuana smell, like then do you want your house smelling like that? And so if you have a little area outside and your outside area isn't too cold for you, you could probably lie on like a sunbed sort of thing outside and do it outside on yourself. That would be ultimate. Like you don't want to make yourself more sick by exposing yourself to outside, but that could be a possibility. And if you do the moxa properly, like you're properly trained to do it, and a practitioner who's willing to show you could show you how to do it and use a moxa box. I've got some here, so I use it on my patients a lot. So this isn't training you how to do it, but I'll just show you a couple of kinds of moxa boxes. So this is a little box, and the moxa kind of sits in the box. Goes into this little thing here. Oops. You have to be careful because once you light this stick up, it can easily burn you. Like if you touch it to your body when this is lit up, it'll completely burn you. And then you have a little mesh thing in the bottom here that stops the ash from going. So you have to push it down so it's not touching it, but it's close to that. And then that kind of just sits on the area like that. And that's one moxa box. Another moxa box style would be this one here. Same kind of thing. It's got a little mesh sort of screen in the bottom there, and it's got a little holder inside that puts the stick in. But these are very fiddly. I'm not really selling it that well. What I'm saying, it's possible to do, that would be a self-treatment you could use, and you just have to lie there and do it on yourself every day for sort of 20 minutes on your belly, 10 minutes maybe, depends on how long it takes for it to get warm there. So that's something you could seek a practitioner's help with to do that. Please don't do the moxa self-treatment by yourself unless you've been trained how to do it. Diet-wise, you would definitely want to stay away from things that are cold. Ice cream, cold foods, icy drinks, that kind of stuff. Stay away from raw foods. Stay away from foods that are really probably sugary foods. I mean, you could even try something like a carnivore diet or something like that, because one of the things with the carnivore diet is a lot of people have found that it has an anti-inflammatory effect on their gut, but also meat is full of yang. Like it's the ultimate yang food, meats. So I wouldn't think that you would have to just do that, although you could try that, but you want to have meat in your diet. And if you find meat hard to digest, you can just stew it or slow cook it. That's one way. Bone broth is another one that's really good for building the gut lining. It's full of collagen. It's really helpful. So you need organic beef bones, and you boil that and you make it like a gelatinous kind of mixture. Many of these foods I've mentioned for different things, but they can be helpful for the same things because it's coming back to the same situation. So we're talking about SIBO here. Someone's asking this question about SIBO, and you've asked this other question about does low HCl cause SIBO? I'm not sure about that in Chinese medicine. Like I can understand. I'm not sure if that's not a Chinese medicine answer, but I can understand how, if that was the case, it would have a flow-on effect. Because it's to do with the yang of that tube. So the yang ming, right? So your yang ming is your stomach, all the way through to your large intestine. Now that's not your small intestine, but it's going to pass through the small intestine along the way, and it's one big tube. This digestive function. So, it, like, yes, I could see how that could have a relationship, but I'm not sure how to answer that question because it's not exactly a Chinese medicine question. So does it cause that? You'd have to go and look up the research in a Western medicine way to see that. But certainly how we would treat this from a diet perspective, you're not influencing your small intestine directly. Firstly, you're influencing your stomach. So when you have ginger, when you have herbs, when you take any food in, it's going to influence your stomach first, and then it's going to go into your small intestine, from there. So what happens in the stomach affects the ability to do the digestion, and this is why the mostly cooked foods thing is so important, because it's the idea of like everything you take into your stomach takes up energy to digest it. And you can either make that job a bit easier for your body, or you can make it a bit harder. By making it a bit easier, you eat more cooked, more warm, more moist. It goes along with what your body likes. Excuse me. If you eat more cold, dry, and raw, it takes up more energy. So it's weakening that digestive fire, which could be considered that low acid in your stomach. The ability to break it down and digest it. All right. Hi, Cassia. If you have a question or others have a question, feel free to ask your questions in the chat. That's what this is for. It's a live stream chat. If you have a particular thing you want to ask about, sometimes I'll have to go back and do a bit of research for you to find out a question for you. Find out an answer for you. I'm just going to put my little heater on for a bit. It's very cold in Perth at the moment where I am, so I'm sorry if the blow fan noise comes on a little bit. I can turn it off if it's really worrying people. So I did mention a couple of books at the start of this stream that can help you. So I'll just re-mention this Tao of Healthy Eating for the SIBO thing, because this kind of explains more about why the cooked foods are really important. So this is the Tao of Healthy Eating by Bob Flores, kind of useful. If you're interested in learning about how Chinese medicine thinks for just in general, there's two little books that I'd recommend, and these are really cool. So one is called The Illustrated Book of Traditional Chinese Cultivation of Health. And this is a cartoon book, and it just sort of talks about the general concepts of Chinese medicine in a cartoony kind of way. And there's two in this series. They've got the Yellow Emperor's classic of internal medicine like this as well. And they just kind of generally talk about the concepts, but with little picture infographics and pictures. And I always found these useful when I was first learning Chinese medicine, because it was such a foreign concept. And different people learn in different ways. And back then there were no YouTube videos at all. Like there was nothing to help you. You just had your old Chinese medicine teachers. And some of them weren't very well equipped at talking articulately. Some of them were great. I had some really great teachers, and some of them were also really great practitioners, but they weren't really good at explaining it, and they had like a lot of Chinglish and stuff, and you were sort of like, oh, I can't really understand this stuff. So when I found these books, I think I even found this in China after I'd already done 3 or 4 years of study, but I bought that Yellow Emperor book as well before that, and it was just like the cartoon version, and it kind of explains things a bit better. Yep. All right. So someone's asking, are salads, fruits, and juicing not recommended even for someone with too much heat? So, yeah, this is a good question. There's a few caveats to this. So in general, we'd say eat mostly cooked foods. That doesn't mean 100% always every time for everybody cooked, right? Cooked foods will be easier to digest than raw foods. For everyone, no matter if you've got heat, whatever's going on, cooked foods will be easier to digest. So if you simply have excess heat, which means no deficiency, now how would you know that? Truly, you'd only know that from your pulse diagnosis, that there's no deficiency there. It's only excess. So the person wouldn't have, like, there'd be more of a blockage in that yang ming area. And by blockage, I mean like they could easily get constipation, because it's going to dry up more than loosen up. If you had a lot of looseness, now that's not saying that if you have constipation, it's always excess, because it's not. There can be types of constipation that are deficiency types too. Generally, if you're younger rather than older, now that's not always the case. There are people who are older who are super healthy and they aren't deficient, but by nature, as you get older, you are going to get more deficient than when you're younger. It could be just heat. And this is why eating fruit gives you the runs or gives you diarrhea from just raw fruits. So I think in general, we want to think of foods as medicinal items, right? Rather than just eating them. We don't really think like that. And it's really I've really got thinking about this topic a lot more, because lately I've been doing the carnivore diet myself. And you kind of then think of other foods that are not. So carnivore diet's basically just meat. So all you're eating is meat. All I eat is like steaks now. Now, not all the time. So I don't want to say I'm only eating that all the time, but that's what I've gone to as my default general diet for the last few months. And then I'm kind of using other foods as either little treats that I would come off that diet for. Like, okay, I'm going to have a pasta because I still love eating that stuff, right? But I'm not going to have that as my general diet all the time or anything. But then also thinking of vegetables and fruits as these medicinal foods. Like the other day, I felt like I felt like something tight in my chest, like, when you feel like you're going to get a cold or a flu. So the first go-to for me would be herbs. Okay, get those herbs. get those herbs into you quickly. Like, I hate getting sick, right? But I also, I just was like, I need a curry. I've not been eating, and I needed something spicy. So I went down to the supermarket and I got this chili tofu that I've had before, right? Now, I only bought that because I didn't feel like cooking up a curry, and I know this stuff is spicy. It's way spicier than what I can normally have. And I ate that spicy food, and in the morning I woke up and I felt fine. I had the herbs. I didn't make a big boiling up pot of herbs. I just had my granules kind of herbs. But that's kind of like when your diet's always kind of the neutral, the same. Now, that's not going to suit everyone. I get that, because it's bland as fuck and it's not it's not that exciting. Excuse the language, but it is. And so you kind of then can see the medicinal properties of foods. What happens is when we eat all foods randomly all the time, you don't notice what they do to you. And this is what herbalists used to do back in the day, is they would fast on a herb. So they would have no food. They would just generally would have a blander kind of diet. So I don't know if those people would have had a meat-only diet. I doubt it. They probably would have had more like a ricey kind of diet. But they would just eat that one food and see what that does. Does that food, then does that food give me diarrhea? Does that food, So this is kind of a bit off topic of answering your question exactly. But your question is, are salads, fruits and juicings not recommended even for someone with too much heat? So if you're very deficient, I would try to avoid that. But if you're not, you could try a little bit of raw stuff as a medicinal. Think of it as a medicinal thing to, like, that should purge that heat. It doesn't mean that you should be eating that stuff all the time to get rid of that heat. If that heat's there, there's a problem with that heat being there. So if I have a patient that needs a Yang Ming purging sort of formula, they shouldn't be taking that for like ever. It should be resolved at some point. Now, it could be coming from the diet, could be coming from stuff that the patient doesn't want to deal with, like their lifestyle or their diet or something, and that's a different story, I guess. But in general, you shouldn't have to keep treating this pattern that's there with foods or with herbs. We should be resolving it. We should be getting to the cause of it. So another caveat for this would be summertime. Like if you're in the US, you're probably coming into summer, and yeah, you can have a lot more raw stuff in summer. Your body can tolerate it. So be aware that if you have too much of it, you're going to get diarrhea, and that would be not a great thing. And if that's happening, maybe back it off. See how you feel. Like, notice it rather than just not be aware of it. And then the next thing is to think, what do you mean by too much heat? By too much heat, is that your own body's yang, and that would be a deficiency. And that's TCM doesn't think like that. TCM thinks like it's heat. Well, where that heat's your body's yang heat in classical Chinese medicine. So why would you purge that away? Like, there's a lot less of that clearing out than. So when you're younger, you could probably have a bit more cold and raw and not notice too much detriment from it. And it's fine in general to eat according to the seasons. So if it's coming into your summer, you could have some stuff. We generally, with the juice and the fruit, you're going to have a lot more sweetness, whereas salads might not be sweet. So that could be okay. If you're having cooked with the raw, that's going to be a lot different to just a big meal of raw all by itself. That would be the worst case scenario. A big bowl of raw, and that's all you have. So better to have something cooked with the raw. It'll be easier for your stomach to digest it. And sometimes even that raw, that bitter, like let's say you have bitter lettuce, or some raw can kind of help the digestive functions of the other a little bit in some cases. All right, so we've got another question here. Heather says, how do you see people who need to strengthen their spleen chi sabotage themselves? That's a good question. And then she says, and how is carnivore for someone who needs to strengthen their spleen? Yeah, exactly. So the carnivore diet makes sense for a spleen chi deficiency person, right? Because it's pure yang. Like meat has the most yang of all the foods. You're eating blood. You're eating a living thing. Now, this might sound a bit gross for people. And I used to be a vegetarian. I was a vegetarian for 9 years. And I couldn't fathom the thought of eating meat. And then one day I just started eating meat. And then I've probably had, I don't know, another 10 or 15 years just eating random foods. When I first started eating meat, I couldn't really cook my own steak. I used to just go out for it. And then I have heard about the carnivore diet from just the internet, and probably Jordan Peterson's. I watched a few of his videos on it, and I've toyed about for myself. This is just for myself. I toyed about with keto diets, and last year I just decided I needed to lose weight. Right, as in I just was like, all right, I'm gonna just do it. I did a thing called 75 hard, and I didn't do the carnivore diet on that. I just did a lowish carb diet. But no sugar, and anyway, I'm not going to go into the details of it. It wasn't like, oh, I did this exact diet. I made up my own diet, but it was very strict about it. If you've seen that 75 hard program, you sort of know what it is. Like, you can't change anything. You're strict, right? You can't even have an M&M or a snacker or anything like that, right? Anyway, so I went off all the things that I love to eat, things like bread or pizza or whatever, like those kinds of carbs or any of that sort of stuff. And I just noticed that for myself, one is for convenience and easiness, I gravitated towards eating more meat, and I felt better when I had it. And I just had noticed that over a 3-month period, sort of gradually going to it. And then my brother decided to do the carnivore diet, so over Christmas time, I'd stopped the 75 hard, and I just kind of let myself have what I wanted because it was Christmas month, as you do. And then I noticed that when I went onto the carnivore diet, like one is like definitely your mental clarity is better. And that tells you something for dampness. So when you talk about spleen chi deficiency, there's always this association of dampness. So dampness happens because your spleen chi hasn't got the functionality, like, or your earth element isn't working well to transform and transport food and fluids, and so the arisal of the clear doesn't happen that well, and that's what gives you that clarity of function in the morning. So a big symptom of dampness is foggy-headedness or cloudy-headedness. Also feeling bloated, feeling heavy, feeling distended, that kind of stuff, right? So like higher protein foods, so talking about going back to carnivore diet, there's a couple of things that has made me go on to thinking about that. One is ease of use. Because if you have to decide every day what am I going to eat, it makes it very difficult. Now, some people love that and they just, they love to cook and things like that. And I do like to cook. I'm not saying I don't like to cook, but just for an everyday thing, it can be easier. you eat your food and you do not feel like eating more food after you've eaten that in general, if you stick on it. For the first few days, if you eat a lot of sugar or stuff like that, or carbs or things beforehand, and I've noticed when I've had someone's birthday and we've had a cake or something like that, unfortunately, it makes it really hard to go back onto it because you're thinking, oh, I've had that cake and, this kind of stuff. So there's a few ways that carnivore diet can help people, or something strict-ish like a carnivore diet can help people who have a spleen chi deficiency, because often people get into that state of having the spleen chi deficiency through their diet, and part of it is like not knowing what to eat or being confused about what you're going to eat, and then that leading you down the path of feeling tired, going through the shopping aisle and just eating whatever's there. Also, I'm more and more inclined as time goes on to realize like the quality of other foods that we have is just not there, and it's so hard to get that quality. So yeah, growing your own fruit and veggies, that's fine. If you're doing that, that's great. You can be assured of the quality. You haven't had pesticides and stuff like that on it. But any other things, so let's say you buy packet stuff like pasta, if you buy bread, if you buy I don't know, anything that's pre-made, right? There's just all these things in it, oils, all these are really bad for your body, and this is why people, I think, are getting these things like SIBO and whatever, all these kind of gut diseases, increase of things like Crohn's disease, these inflammational things, like seed oils and these kinds of, stuff, this sort of stuff that's used in commercial production of foods. So one is it makes it harder to quit those foods because it's so delicious. Forget the name of the thing where they call it like flavorability or something like that. You eat it and you just want to eat more of it, like that happens with trans fats in foods. We don't have trans foods changing from one food to another yet. But like you can see how that might happen. Genetically modified foods is part of the problem, right? So this is an issue that we face, right? And it's like it makes it harder. So that's one of the reasons why I think the carnivore diet could be useful. Or something where you just think, okay, I'm just going to restrict myself to these things. It doesn't have to be forever, but just for a time, and then you see how you feel when you have those other things. So going back to that idea of like you're fasting on a particular food, back in the day when you were a herbalist checking to see, oh, what does this do? What does that do? You won't know what something does if you're having so much of everything, and how that's working for you. So that's one thing. Now, how do I see people who need to strengthen their spleen chi sabotage themselves? So part of it was answered in that other part, I guess. It's like it's a double-edged sword in a way, or it's a double whammy. Like on one hand, I believe people have the ability to control themselves if they decide that they want to control themselves. But it's also hard. It is hard. Like I know that it's hard because I find it hard myself, and I know that what's the right thing to do. But it's also like these foods are like criminal, in a way. It makes it really hard to stop eating them, and that people are tricked into thinking something's good for you, or it's healthy for you, or it's even should it even be legally allowed? Like these kinds of things that are in packet stuff and seed oils, again, all this sort of stuff, and then that making it difficult. Okay, lifestyle is difficult for people, and so they've got a time limitation. One of the things that makes it easier for people is if they plan ahead and they do meal prepping, right? So especially if you're busy, so you have to use like half a Sunday almost to meal prep for the rest of the week. Now you're going to then set yourself up for a great week, and you're going to eat all properly in the foods. My sister does this a lot. She lives in Hong Kong, and she makes these salads in jars and puts like a massive salad with like a cooked bit and some salads and things like that in there, but in a way that when you turn it upside down, then all the sauce kind of goes over it, and so it can kind of last for a week with all this layering thing with all the veggies and stuff. And she sometimes does that as a stir fry, and then she'll tip that jar into a cooker or something. Like you've got to work out some system for yourself that preps you for the right thing through the week. So that's part of it. there's part of diet therapy and psychology, that intersectionality of those things where like inherently people know what's wrong and right for them in a way. For most part, right? Like like I don't think anyone goes, oh, that whole block of chocolate's good for me. Like, that it's not good for you. Like you might not intend to eat the whole thing, but you start eating one thing. And so the self-sabotage thing comes back to knowing yourself and being aware enough to say, okay, like a habit that you can stop, creating habits that stop you from doing that sort of stuff. So I'll give you a good example. Like the other last weekend. So I've been doing this carnivore thing for a while, and then I was like, the last weekend, I was like, I'm gonna buy some food that I really want to have, just treat food. I'm gonna have a treat weekend. So I went to the supermarket and bought a pizza and something else. I don't know, a block of chocolate. And I was talking to the checkout lady, and I said, "Oh, this is my treat food or something." But, like I don't like to keep this in the house because I know I'm going to get hungry late at night, and I know that if it's there, I'll think about having it. But if it's not there, I won't be able to eat it. So, I'll buy it now and just have it for the couple of days on the weekend, that kind of thing. And then I took the I instead of snapping a few pieces of chocolate off and taking it to the couch where I was watching some TV, I took the whole block of chocolate there. And then I'd eaten way more than I thought I was going to eat. So you have to know yourself, right? And say, okay, I'm going to stop doing that, or this is the habit that I know that happened last time. So that's a kind of, if you know that about yourself, then it would make sense that you don't bring the whole block of chocolate with you, just take a piece, and then you have to get up off the couch, and then that creates a thing of like thinking about it. Am I going to do this? Am I not going to do this? The same thing is in the shops. Like, if you buy it, you're going to eat it, this kind of stuff. And it's hard. It's discipline. You've got to tell yourself what you're going to be doing. And I don't usually talk about myself on this channel that much, but that's an example of that, right? So, I think people know. They don't need someone to tell them what's right and wrong in terms of the volume of food you should be eating, or when you've done something like that. So, yeah. So that's kind of the answer to that question. And sometimes the sabotage thing is not like an intentional sabotage. I think sometimes we're told this is healthy or not healthy. I see a lot of people that have gone on a raw foods diet and then they've ended up being really sick at the end of it. Like their spleen cheese really bad. They don't have the energy to do the job of doing digestion very well. And they were okay at the time, and they did it in good faith, thinking that was a healthy thing to do. That's unfortunately, on one hand, there are people that are okay on that kind of diet, but a lot of people don't feel good on it in the long term. So if other people have a question, that's fine to ask it. Carol says, thank you about the SIBO. I'm seeing a TCM, but he thinks I'm low on HCl and digestive enzymes. Yep, so that's fine. In Chinese medicine, the way to treat that is to keep treating that pattern of disharmony, and your body's going to start to do what it's going to do. Not give you more enzymes or give you more acid. Not that we would do that, but your body needs to start restoring its function, restoring its ability to kind of do that. And if there's not as much hydrochloric acid in your stomach, like that, or that acidic environment isn't good, then it's even more important that you that would be the ability to heat things up. So it's even more important that you don't have cold, that you don't have dry, that you don't have raw. So particularly warm foods, eating them warm. Make sure you don't have too much cold stuff, and the quality of foods being warm. So lamb is the warmest meat. Lamb stew, that kind of stuff. Bone broth is good. Putting that in the other foods. Obviously leafy green vegetables are really good, and you could just slightly steam them, warm them with the other foods even sometimes. That can be done. Yep. A lot of the functions or the detriments of foods happen not just from that food in isolation. Some do, right? Like sugar is always going to be sugar and do what it does. But a lot of the detriment of it happens because of the combination of foods that we have rather than that one food in isolation. So there is, for instance, sugar is a treatment food in Chinese medicine. Back in the Han Dynasty, there was formulas that used maltose, yitang, which is like a sugary syrup. And some people sort of pause at the idea now that, well, back at that time, they wouldn't have had much sugar in their diet. It wouldn't have been like, you didn't have refined sugar just as part of foods. It certainly wouldn't have been thrown in for extra flavor and things like that. It would have been a more rarer commodity. And sugar or maltose, that the function of it in Chinese medicine is kind of like a pure energy tonic. Like it's just going to give you energy to do what your body needs, and it makes what it needs to make out of it. But we have so much of it now that it becomes a detriment to us. It's not really a medicine. It's not really needed as a medicine. So everything has a detriment, and it has a function as well. It has a good thing and a bad thing. It's just about the volume of stuff and the context in which you have it. So, yeah. All right. I did say I would talk about some of these essential oils in this talk. If people have other questions, we don't have to talk about essential oils, but I did say I'd talk about this. Yeah, I really like this book. It's quite rare to kind of find a book that talks about. So it's called Aromatherapy for Healing the Spirits by Gabrielle Mojay, M-O-J-A-Y. Restoring Emotions and Mental Balance with Essential Oils. This book kind of talks about what oils can do, different things for mental, emotional functions and things like that in a Chinese medicine way, a bit of the 5 element aspects of things. One of the oils I like a lot is frankincense. It's a bit of an expensive oil, but it's kind of more of a healing oil. I wouldn't waste it in the oil burner, just dropping it in there. I mean, you can, but like it's more something you'd put on your body or put on yourself. It's used a lot for healing, wound healing. You could put it into makeups, or not makeups, but skin products and things like that you make yourself, that kind of stuff. So frankincense comes from, it's a Chinese herb itself, used in TCM for blood moving properties and like healing when you've got blood stasis, when you've had an injury. It's often used in that way to move chi and blood and promote healing. Let's talk about it in this 5 element way. So frankincense oil's ability to smooth the flow of chi energy and calm the nerves means that, like essential oils of chamomile and lavender, it has a useful analgesic or pain relieving action. This is applicable for rheumatic, menstrual and epigastric pain. So that would be, rheumatic is like joint pains, menstrual obviously like, period pain, that kind of stuff, or epigastric is like abdominal pain. Usually with essential oils, when you're rubbing them on, you wouldn't rub them directly onto the skin. If you're not sure if you're allergic to it or something like that, you could do a little test with something first by rubbing it sort of around. Usually people rub it around their wrist area, to not rub a lot of it, but just put a little dot on there to check it. But you could also just use a carrier cream. So I would usually recommend to my patients, if they have a moisturizer that they normally know they don't react to, so something you already use that doesn't have any other fragrance in it, which most moisturizers shouldn't have a fragrance in them, but some do, like a plain kind of moisturizer, then you would just mix a little bit of this. Don't mix it into the big pot of it, because you won't know if you're going to use it or not. You waste it. So I would just squirt a little bit of the moisturizer into your hand and then drop one drop and mix it in, yourself, and then use it on the area. I would never rub anything on my face. I shouldn't say that because I have tested stuff on my face before, but I wouldn't recommend you rub things onto your face as the first port of call. Like, put it somewhere else because you don't want your face to go to react to something. But I like testing things out, so I have tested those things out like that. So you could make a little cream out of this to rub on these areas, or a balm or something like that. Considered by some to strengthen the immune system, it's especially useful like tea tree oil, where in cases where nervous depression is in danger of weakening the defensive chi. So defensive chi is like this chi that kind of promotes, strengthening against the environment. Frankincense oil has a profound psychological and spiritual benefits, long recognised by the religious and spiritual traditions in the world over. So you might recognise, gold, frankincense, and myrrh were the things given to baby Jesus by the wise men. It's one of the oldest commodities or oils or things like that. Might have some frankincense here somewhere on the shelf, actually. It looks like a little golden sort of, it's a resin, right? In terms of the 5 elements, frankincense oil may be likened on a fundamental level to that of earth, where its ability to calm and center the mind reflects its tranquilizing yet deeply clarifying effects on the intellect, or the yi. Like sandalwood oil, it's an ideal aid to meditation, contemplation, prayer, ceasing mental chatter and stilling the mind. Facilitating the state of single-pointed concentration, it allows the spirit to soar. Right. Oh, thank you. Holistic Goth, I just saw your super chat. Thank you very much that you love my channel. Yeah. I'm not recommending you test anything on your face. It made me laugh because of when I was reading about the frankincense oil, about testing on your face, because this is a true story what happened. So I have a little shop associated with my business, and at this time I had a bigger shop, and I used to make a lot of products for the shop, and also dispense out essential oils. And I had a customer come in and wanted some frankincense oil, and it's really expensive oil, right? And it's more expensive now than it was back then, even 10 years ago, I think this was. And I was pouring the oil out, and some spilled out. And I was like, oh no. And it sort of spilled onto the bench. And you can't do anything with it. Well, you can't scoop it back up into the bottle. It's gone on the bench. So I put my hands in it, because I was like, don't waste this frankincense oil. I put it on my face. I just put it on there. And it was a lot. I just put my hands in the spilled oil and put it on my face. I was like, oh, don't waste it. That whole day I felt really high. I was like, ooh, maybe this this excessive amount of frankincense oil on my face is making me high. But I was like, oh, hopefully it's helping my skin. Yeah, and the shop did smell really, really nice after that. Right, so I'm going to go to a much cheaper kind of oil now, so that it's a bit more user-friendly for people, and maybe an oil that you use a lot yourself. Here's one that I like a lot, and this is good. Now, it's not super cheap or anything, juniper oil. Now, juniper comes from juniper berries, and I use juniper a lot in my... I use juniper a lot in my incense that I make, because it's combustible. It lights up really easily. It's good to make incense. Juniper in Chinese medicine is linked to the kidneys and the will, like the zhi, so activating your willpower. Let me read from this book here. It says, juniper berry's pungent aroma is clearly associated with both energetically and psychologically an ability to disperse and cleanse. It's no wonder that since ancient times it's been associated with spiritual purification, as well as the power to drive out negative influences. On the other hand, the warm, sweet and woody notes of this incense reflect its fortifying potential. We can clearly link this to the action of the kidneys, its reinforcing effect on the will, or the zhi. The juniper works therefore to break through psychological stagnation and consolidate willpower. So we've been talking a little bit about before, if you've just jumped into this chat, about the self-sabotage and things like that, right? And some of it is that aspect of will. You want to do something, you know what you want to do, but you feel powerless to do it. So in Chinese medicine, they have this saying of like, when you activate your will, your zhi, you strengthen your zhi, your will. Which, yeah, that makes sense. But you got to get through that barrier. You got to do it. You got to strengthen it. You got to get into it, right? So this is an oil you can kind of use. Now, if you believe that it works, it becomes a placebo for you as well. So I'm not saying waste money on things that don't work and just pretend it works, but you could, if you don't have the money to buy juniper oil, the idea of believing that something, I'm going to do this ritual and then I'm going to do this other thing, could be part of doing it as well. But I love essential oils. And I really do think they help you with certain things. Like it creates a different sense of the same room, especially if you're in a stagnant space. Like you've been in that same space all day and you're like, okay, now I have a lot of people coming into my space, right? Like a lot of patients coming into my rooms and things like that. And you might want to create, a nice environment with smell. Okay. So we've got some other questions here, right? So someone says, so I have to be careful with too much meat because of the Western definition of low stomach acid. Right. Yeah, so this is a bit of a catch-22 here, and I'm not saying do or don't eat these foods. Go about this with your practitioner, but it's like if you cook meats, they definitely are easier to, as in you slow cook them. You cook them with water. It breaks up the fibers. And it makes it easier to digest them. But also what you'll find if you get onto these, like go and look up carnivore diet for SIBO and see if other people have had an experience. There's lots of doctors that are kind of promoting it as well. Like you might find you don't need to eat as much food. So that in itself would benefit your stomach if it's not working as hard. It's because you're fuller on less food. Anyway. So someone said, I heard about cosmetic acupuncture. Would that work? Also, would you recommend using gua shas at home? Yeah, great question. That's a great question. So, yes, I've done cosmetic acupuncture myself on patients before. It's not something that I promote that I do now. I can do it. Gun to my head, I could easily do it. It's something that is a kind of a more modern aspect of Chinese medicine. And there are some practitioners that really specialize in it because they do it a lot and they've done more courses on it. And so I'm not saying I'm not poo-pooing the idea at all. It's born out of the concept of treating scar tissue. So there are some acupuncture techniques that are used when people have scars. And like this is very vaguely kind of the idea, right? Like one of the ideas that are kind of given birth to this idea. Plus people are interested in it. It's a money-making thing for practitioners. On one hand, it's also very time-consuming. So the amount of needles that are needed to be placed into the skin for it to be effective are a lot. So in a normal consultation, a normal acupuncture treatment, I might use 15 to 20 acupuncture needles on a patient throughout their body. And the idea is that you're stimulating the qi or the energy of the points. Probably can turn that thing off now. It's not needed to be so loud. You're stimulating the qi. Now, sometimes we do that with facial or cosmetic acupuncture as well. So you're still using acupuncture points and inserting them perpendicularly or in their right direction in order to stimulate the qi. So you're going to feel tingly and all the rest of it from that treatment. In addition to that, with cosmetic acupuncture, there'd probably be 50 needles used on your face. Now, I know that sounds like it maybe is putting some people off instantaneously, like, whoa, 50 needles. They're used it's done in a different way. I actually did a talk on my channel once with a cosmetic acupuncturist from Melbourne who's very well known in the industry. You'll have to look up her thing on there somewhere. And we were talking about the different things that they do, right? So, so the needles that are used is one of their different needles. They're much more expensive needles. This is why the cost is a lot higher. It takes the practitioner longer to stick them in because you're in a more delicate area on the face. And it's a different technique that's kind of used. So imagine that this is a line on your face. Like I'll use a big Sharpie pen so that we can kind of all see it here really easily. This is the wrinkle, the line, right? So instead of sort of the needles going, and this is looking at your skin this way, instead of the needles going like this, we would stick them this way across. So there might be many going across like this, or on different ways. So it's going to stimulate collagen to be produced underneath, around that, where that line is. That's one of the premises of it. What's one of the ideas of it? There are cosmetic acupuncture techniques that are used for things like strengthening ligaments to raise the breasts. Like that's probably a lot more a lot more treatments may be needed for something to happen. In China, cosmetic type of Chinese medicine treatments are used for people who generally have very small breasts. Like a lot of Chinese women are small breasted compared to Western women, and they actually use massive cups on this area and do cupping to increase the breast size. Now you couldn't do that on someone like me because you wouldn't get a cup to you wouldn't be able to give me a massive a massive chest with cupping, although I'm sure that someone could create giant cups. But the idea of having a really smaller breast and making it a little bit more larger with cupping is something that they do. I've seen that being done. So these are just different ideas that are used in cosmetic acupuncture. And I've seen, you have to do regular treatments of it for it to be effective. I do acupuncture on my own face from time to time, like I don't sit there and go, like I've got wrinkles here now at the side of my face. I probably should do more treatment on them. I don't have time for that. I don't even have time to do my own face. But yeah, the other downside of cosmetic acupuncture is that there's always a potential of bruising and bleeding with any acupuncture, but there's a higher chance of it with cosmetic acupuncture because you're having so many needles in your face. So if you do a course of 8 treatments or so on your face, one of those treatments is you're probably going to get like a bruise around your eye. Like it's probably going to happen. Now, it's not like it's going to damage that area, but you might not want to go around with a bruise around your eye, but it might be okay for a little while, in between, like for the greater benefit of what's going to happen. Risk. You can't, no practitioner can say that there's no risk of that. There is a risk of that. So I'm not saying it would happen on every treatment, but if I was going to do 8 treatments on someone, I would hazard a guess that they're going to have a bruise on their face at least on one of those treatments. So that's kind of just a part and parcel of it. You would sign a consent form and it'd be properly explained to you what that is. Now, the gua sha at home. Gua sha is great. So gua sha is, let me see if I got a little gua sha here somewhere. Just give me 2 secs. I'm just going to get that. I've got one in the front of my shop. Give me 1 second. So there's 2 things you can use. This is a gua sha. This is a little sort of horn one, and there's like little black ones and different coloured ones and whatever jade ones. So you can kind of use this to under the thing. You always want to go in an upward direction. Now, if your practitioner's given you instructions, do that yourself. Chinese medicine people also use these Chinese soap spoons. Now, these are super cheap. This says 3 yuan on it, 3 Chinese dollars, which is like 75 cents in China. You want to make sure it's smooth because sometimes they're made out of ceramic, so sometimes they might have something that's a bit hard on the edge. Clean, obviously, not a soupy one. But these things could be used on less delicate areas. So on your face, let me put that here. I don't know whether I would use this on my face, but you could use it very lightly on your face. But you certainly could use this on gua sha on your arm or something like that. So what you're supposed to do with gua sha is get the sha. The sha is redness, like erythema, so red, and if you keep going, it's going to become sort of purpley, bruisey coloured. We could do it on our arm here. I'm not going to take my shirt off, but like this is quite painful because I'm pressing, fairly hard. It shouldn't be painful on your face, but it's kind of a good pain. So after you finish doing this on here, maybe this isn't as painful on this forearm. Your hands should be tingly, or the area around it, you might do it on your neck or something like that. You always want to go from the top to the bottom with your body. With your face, you're not trying to sort of dredge the channels like you would with this way, like you going from top to bottom. You can go upwards. So whenever you touch your face, you should always go in an upwards direction. Otherwise, you're going to drag your face down and possibly get more detriment there. So you always want to sort of touch your face. Even when you're putting makeup on or anything like that, you always want to go in an upwards direction. If you're washing your face, anything like that. So you could go your stomach channel here at the sides, kind of going like this on there. I'm not going to do it on my face because I've got makeup on here, but going up like that. I wouldn't do it till you've got redness on your face badly, just a little bit of red. The gua sha on your face is not intended to be like the blacky purple areas. I don't know if anyone's ever done that on their face, but I don't think that would be nice. If you had a lot of tightness in your masseter muscle, this is your big muscle here of your jaw, like from clenching and grinding your jaw, or you had TMJ, temporomandibular joint syndrome, or something like that, then you might do the gua sha more heavily on that area. But yeah, gua sha at home is good because it's basically getting blood flow to the area, and it's promoting like the excretion of toxins and things like that from the area, like it's promoting circulation. So it's similar to like a facial massage that you're having. Also, what you do the gua sha with makes a difference in some schools of thought. So if you've got nothing else, you could use a spoon and just do it real gently. But jade is often used on the face because it's quite cooling. It's kind of considered a beauty thing, a beauty stone. And it's cool. It's sort of soothing and cooling there. Yeah. All right. So yeah. If there's any other questions, people can ask those questions, and we might just finish in a little bit. Let me see if I've got nice oil we can look at quickly. Orange would be a good one because orange is actually like a really cheap oil. It's easy to get hold of usually, and it's quite a common oil that's used in making cleaning products and things like that because it's got a nice fragrance, but it's also quite an inexpensive oil, cheap oil. So all citrus things have a chi moving effect, right? You're going to move liver chi. And so if you have a lot of stagnation, like you sit around a lot or you have to work in the desk a lot, or you're finding that you're doing something that is really, monotonous, or you're a creative person, you want to get your creative juices flowing, smelling citrus is going to help you with that. So Chen pea is a citrus peel that's used in lots of herbal medicine things. In tea, you can have it. Yeah, we can do rosehip as well. Orange is going to have an effect of moving chi. Now you can also combine orange. It might be a bit not so great to have it by itself. You can combine it with lavender. It's commonly done with that. Could be combined with other citrus oils. Like orange kind of sits as a middle note to a top note, right? It's probably not as hitting in your face as something like lemon, but lemon would have a similar effect to orange. So orange has an effect on the liver chi, on the wood element, similar to bergamot and mandarin. It's got a relaxing, chi-moving, sour quality that kind of relates to the wood element. Whenever there's an excessive buildup of stress or frustration, the chi becomes blocked and stagnates, causing a disharmony between the liver and the constriction of the ethereal soul, or the hun. This is a really interesting part of Chinese medicine. There are these spiritual aspects. So today we talked already about the zhi, which is the willpower that's connected to the water or the kidney aspect. The ethereal soul is like the aspect of your soul that relates to dreaming. This is where your life planning comes into it. Ability to think ahead, and where like a lack of this expression could be part of why depression causes people to have that lack of, seeing a future for their life. Anyway, sweet orange helps to move stagnant qi and ease tension and frustration. Its warm, sunny, sweet aroma conveys joy and positivity, dispersing the moodiness and irritability that takes hold when liver qi stagnates. More specifically, sweet orange oil is ideally suited to the hardworking individual who strives to perfection and achievement, but has little tolerance for mishaps and mistakes. So getting angry easily at work, maybe a bit intolerant of people. Excellent planners who find it difficult to delegate. They become tense and irritable because they try too hard. I'm just reading it from this book. This very tension and a reluctance to call on others' help and advice often seems to initiate the problems that they seek to avoid. Ultimately, they come to expect that things are bound to go wrong. Sweet orange oil helps us to take a more adaptive, relaxed approach, encouraging adaptability, smooth handling of events associated with juniper. That's the one I was talking before about the willpower. The planet, Jupiter, not juniper. Associated with Jupiter, the planet of optimism, it also instills a more positive attitude, a philosophical view of difficulties. By conveying an easygoing, skillful approach to life, the oil truly embodies good luck. Right, so it's going to help to smooth and remove that sort of obstacles. All right, let's talk about rosehip. So rose as a general oil is the main one we look at here. This book doesn't have rosehip by itself, but it's kind of from the same concept. So I think the rosehip is got the little bud at the end of it, rather than just the petals. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the little green bit at the bottom including in it. Rose oil is one of the most suitable ingredients of ointments and lotions for the skin, particularly when it's inflamed or dehydrated or affected by rashes and boils. Rose water too is excellent for soothing and toning the skin, which is sensitive and dry. A gentle tonic of the heart, the key to rose's psychological properties lies mainly in its effect on the mind, the shen, on our emotional being. Rose oil calms and yet supports the heart, helping to nourish heart yin and restore a sense of well-being. It's beneficial for nervous anxiety, insomnia, and palpitations. On a more subtle level, the power of the rose may be symbolized by its traditional classification of the herb of love, sacred to Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love, beauty, and fertility. The enticing floral sensuality of rose oil has made it a renowned aphrodisiac. At the same time, damask rose is the holy symbol of God's love for the world. It's also shown around the Virgin when she appeared to Saint Bernadette at Lourdes. The compassion of the flower is revealed through its ability to heal emotional wounds. So it's about the shen, it's about the mind, which is calming, your cognitive function, your mind, but also that emotional capacity of your mind. It's a fire element oil, and it's kind of a cooling, and it's either sweet or slightly sour in its flavour. So often used to kind of clear heat from that area. So if you have anxiety, there's often this heart heat, or they said it affects heart yin, which is kind of this idea of heat harassing the mind and needing to kind of anchor that, calm that, soothe that. So yes, thanks Savage Bunny. Say that when the petals fall off and they are the red balls, and you see the rose you see on rose bushes in winter. Yeah, so they're just like little, they've got the green thing on the bottom. Yeah, like little rose buds. Yeah. Rose oil is also very expensive oil, and so this is why you have rose water, which is like the I think it's part of how they make rose oil, but it's like just the water part of that, like not the water part of the oil, but like less rose petals are needed to use it. I'm not an expert at how all essential oils are made, but there are different methods. So some are like soaked in something, some are distilled, like steam distilled and things like that. Yeah, so rose water, people spray it on their face for that reason. So you could kind of do that make a rose water spray. And you could make it yourself if you've got rose petals, and you can just soak them in water. There's recipes to how to make rose water online. I've seen people with little YouTube videos about that. A lot of people use it as a face toner spray. Rose water. You can also use it as an ingredient in making a face mask and things like that. It's got a beautiful smell to it. Rose water. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, hopefully that's been useful and helpful to people today. So I have some patients to see soon. I'm going to have to clear out all my my equipment out of my room, put it all in the consult room, my cameras and all that. So I hope this has been useful and helpful to you. I am going to do this regularly, once a week for a while, as best as I can. And next week it won't be at the same time. I'll do one for the UK people. If you haven't already jumped into my email list, you can do that there's a link associated with this video to get a free personality test from me, and then you'll be part of my email for Chinese Medicine Podcast. Now, I don't send out emails that often. I just use it to let you know here's a live stream, or if I've got a new course or something like that, I might let you know that. But I don't have time to send out a lot of emails, so you won't be bombarded with a lot of emails there. But you will get the free personality test that I've created if you want to try that and see what 5-element personality you are. So you can do that, and if you can't find the link to that one somewhere, I think I put it with this live stream video. You can also find that on any of the personality videos that I've done for 5 elements. If you'd like to support the channel, please smash the like button and share the stream if you find this, or share a video if you find this stuff helpful and useful. But yeah, just subscribing is really helpful. That's good. Make sure you subscribe. And thanks everyone. Thanks for the super chat. Appreciate that. And if people would like to learn a little bit more, then I've got courses that I'm organising, that I have done live, and I've packaged some together to do. You can check those out on. I think there's a link to one of those things in this on this video there too. So yeah, hopefully you're enjoying learning about Chinese medicine. I'm glad you could listen all night. Yeah, so it's 10:30 in the morning for me now, so it's probably about 10:30 in the night for you guys. So have a good sleep and enjoy learning about Chinese medicine, and I'll see you on another video soon. Thank you.